talked about it on the phone. But how you really feel about it, I don't really know.
What's your take on Cassidy's? 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 Misogynist. Genius. Misogynist. Genius. Misogynist. Genius. Misogynist. Genius. What's your take on Cassidy's? What's your take on Cassidy's? What's your take on Cassidy's?
Welcome to There's Sometimes a Buggy, Irresponsible Opinions About Classic Film. I'm Maurice.
I am Dave. This week, we are returning to the Hollywood studios year by year, and it's 1932. We are moving back to the first studio in our order of operations, which is Paramount Pictures.
Very archetypal product from Paramount of this time period.
Certainly, if you are, as we are, taking Ethan Morden's book seriously, this is the kind of movie he's talking about that you associate indelibly with Paramount. Comic operettas. First, we've got Ernst Lubitsch, 1 Hour with You, and then Rouben Mamoulian's Love Me Tonight.
Now, this was kind of an unbalanced pairing.
I think so too. It's pretty hard to come down in favor of 1 Hour with You, I think.
We chose 1 Hour with You because it was one of the Chevalier and MacDonald operettas we had not seen. I hadn't even heard of it. And then we paired that with something that we knew to be a masterpiece, and so a little bit not fair to Lubitsch.
No.
The way this hand was dealt. 1 Hour with You, only the second Chevalier and MacDonald?
No.
No, the third. So there's Love Parade, and there's Smiling Lieutenant, and then we have 1 Hour with You. The most famous, as far as I'm aware, are the first and the last, the Love Parade and the Merry Widow.
Yeah, the Merry Widow was made at MGM.
Oh, right, that's right. So we're not going to do that one, not for Paramount anyhow. So this was made the same year as Trouble in Paradise, and it does share some features with it.
Yeah, I don't think it's nearly as good as Trouble in Paradise.
Obviously not. That would have been a more balanced pairing. What's your familiarity with these MacDonald and Chevalier and Lubitsch operettas?
Well, I have seen all of them.
You've seen 1 Hour with You before?
Yeah, I did see all of them. I got the Eclipse DVD set that has all of the Lubitsch films for Paramount with those two. But only once. I'd only seen each of them once.
Have you seen Monte Carlo?
Yes.
That was the one that I got obsessed with in my early 20s.
But that one only once as well.
In my early 20s, when I was gaining my first education in cinema with my husband, the filmmaker, he's really into the Lubitsch operettas. I don't think that's a long-term obsession of his. I don't know. At that particular moment, he was really into them. And anything he was really into, I tried to kind of leave to him so that we could each have our own interests. I no longer care about that. We can blend into one mind, Dave, if we so desire. Though we don't. We have a lot of overlap, but we definitely have our separate interests. I think the ones I had seen were The Merry Widow, and maybe I saw Love Parade, but then I just got obsessed with Monte Carlo because Jack Buchanan is so fucking weird.
He is weird.
And also Guy had an album of Jack Buchanan singing. English music hall weirdo. He looks like a dissipated skeleton in Top Hat and Tails.
Well,
sounds like one too.
He's most famous these days for people who are into classic film at all. He is in The Bandwagon.
Right, but that's
in the 50s.
That's not the good Jack Buchanan.
Well,
this is the good stuff. I would play that album over and over and over, and I can still hear him effeatly warbling in my mind. Also, Monte Carlo is the one where Jeanette, MacDonald, at least in the sound mix of the VHS version that I saw in the mid-90s, screeches Beyond the Blue Horizon, and that was very memorable as well. So that was my biggest memory. And then I also watched with him a few of the MacDonald and Nelson Eddy pairings, such as Here Comes the Mounties.
Well, that's a song.
I know.
That's not what the movie's called.
No.
Rosemary?
Yeah, I think that's Rosemary. They're not considered top MacDonald.
One of my favorite MacDonalds is The Firefly.
Yeah, you showed me that. That was very good.
It's an incredible film. It's the one entry in that series that doesn't have Nelson Eddy.
And it benefits from it.
It does, yeah. Nelson Eddy's kind of a detriment. But Jeanette MacDonald, I really like her. And those Eddy films are not terrible. Some of them are actually really good.
Which ones?
Out of the MacDonald Eddy films, I do think Maytime is pretty great.
What makes you stand up for that one in particular?
I have only seen it once. Oh, it was directed by Robert Z. Leonard. Maybe that's why. I always love his movies. I didn't even know that he had directed that one. I just remember liking it a lot. It had some real stakes to it and some drama. And John Barrymore is really good in it, too.
All right. Well, I'd be perfectly happy to revisit the Nelson Eddies.
She's tremendous in Borzage's Smiling Through, the remake in 1941. That's a really great movie that she made with her husband, Gene Raymond.
So Jeanette MacDonald, actually both of them, Jeanette MacDonald and Chevalier, seem like real early talkie curiosities now in a lot of ways. First of all, the idea of an opera singer being a kind of pop star who could also become a movie star is quite foreign to us now. And her particular soprano style, as I've already alluded to, is not the one familiar either to contemporary opera fans or mid-century opera fans, of which I count myself one.
I like her voice. I like Irene Dunne singing. You know, they're the same, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's the soprano style of the 1930s, I guess.
Yeah, 20s and 30s.
Yeah. She's also kind of odd-looking.
Oh, she's cute.
She's definitely cute, but it's interesting because she's always, well, very naughty, risque, sexy in these early Lubitches, and then she loses some of that in the Nelson Eddy movies.
Sure.
So it's interesting.
Not in The Firefly, though, where she's playing an international woman of mystery.
It was interesting being reminded of what Jeanette MacDonald was really like this period in both of these movies, and particularly in 1 Hour with You, because she has to play a little more slightly more standoffish in Love Me Tonight.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll talk 1 Hour with You to begin with.
As you mentioned, this comes in the middle of the Lubitsch cycle with Chevalier and MacDonald.
It is a Samson Raphaelson screenplay, which made me expect more than we got. It was assistant directed by Cukor.
Yeah. And we've got some able assistants in comedy playing. We've got Geneviève Tobin in there as Mitzi, and she does a great job. She's a Warner Brothers star for a little while in the 30s. Then she kind of gets demoted, and she's in smaller parts, but she's always around. She's in The Petrified Forest, and I really like her little role in The Petrified Forest. That's a movie we're going to have to cover in 1936.
You do love that movie.
I do. We've got Roland Young as the professor of ancient history, and Charlie Ruggles, who Elise always just calls Major Applegate.
I do.
But we saw him in both of these films.
He's very much imprinted on my memory that way. So I already alluded to the oddity of Jeanette MacDonald, but there is also the oddity of Maurice Chevalier, who I guess was an enormous star.
Enormous, right?
Enormous French star by the time he was paired with Jeanette MacDonald.
As you can see from the title cards, he's above the title and she's below. So he was huge.
He had been a giant star since, I'm just looking at his Wikipedia page, since 1909. Started in show business in 1901 and was born in 1888.
So he was a mere youth when he began on the stage.
As with many of these insanely popular stars of olden times, it can be difficult to fully understand.
Oh no, I love him. I think he's really entertaining.
Oh, he does some masterful stuff in Love Me Tonight, for sure. He's really given a lot of opportunity in that movie.
Yeah, and
more than poor Jeanette MacDonald. She kind of has a bit of a thankless role in that movie, but she does have her moments.
Yeah, let's talk about that one later. For this one, though, this is really hardcore Chevalier shtick, right? Talking to the camera. Maybe about 50% of his dialogue is to the camera.
Most people, of course, most movie lovers know him best from much later in Gigi, where he does that the entire time.
So he sings songs to us, but he also just has little asides to us. He'll go in to have sex, but come back out and tell us all about the backstory that we're missing.
1 Hour with You actually related more closely to the Edward Everett Horton farce that we saw. What was that studio? Which studio
RKO.
For RKO last. More than it did to Love Me Tonight.
Lonely Wives.
Like, every single line is a double entendre. Well, not a double innuendo. Every single line is an innuendo.
Yeah, the papers were full of innuendo.
The less it appears to have to do with sex, the more absurd its outward relationship to the concept of sex is, the funnier it is, basically, is the rule.
He can. I'm telling you, he can.
Make a face like an owl!
He never does it,
No, he
though.
doesn't do it. I bet Chevalier could do that, so people were, waiting for it. So Cukor did so much on 1 Hour with You that they fought over credit.
Right, okay.
Interesting. I guess that's why it says with the assistance of and not co-directed or anything like that, or assistant director.
What you didn't read, the part on Wikipedia, is that Lubitsch, it is a Lubitsch project, and then he was too busy working on The Man I Killed, which is a really cool movie that I want to see again someday. It went over budget or over time, so they just brought in Cukor to do it, and then Lubitsch came in to do his thing when he was able to, and then a fight erupted. So I guess you can't say that this is a pure Lubitsch versus Mamoulian matchup, even.
Nope, not at all. And who knows? I like Cukor as a director, but is that why it suffers so much? Who knows?
Look.
It's a light farce. It's a really light farce.
Yeah, this is just me. I really do like Lubitsch, but all of my favorites of his films are the non-operettas.
Well, yeah.
Trouble in Paradise and Ninotchka.
Well, like I said,
Shop Around the Corner.
I've only seen these many years ago, and only, other than Monte Carlo, only once each. I'm not prepared to say that. I'd want to see the operettas again, but yeah, this was a weak one. What was interesting to think about while watching it is how it relates to the rest of his oeuvre, which is in terms of the infidelity plot.
Yeah.
Or, more rightly, infidelity verging on threesome? Or not threesome, but sexual sharing.
Yeah, like Design for Living is a threesome movie.
If you watch this movie, you'd think that Lubitsch and Raphaelson's idea is that men should be allowed to be very, very naughty in relationships and get away with infidelity, and women, the equivalent of that is for women to just think about it.
Yeah, fantasize.
But not true if you see the rest of their movies. There's both Design for Living, where Marion Hopkins has a relationship with two men.
That's true.
And I believe that happens, it's been very long since I saw it, but that happens in Desire too, doesn't it? Doesn't Lady Dietrich have an affair or something like that?
No, in that one she's really more interested in Gary Cooper, and she's just got entanglements with another guy.
Well, still, sexually.
No, but not really. She's just sort of caught from her past with some other guy.
Oh, okay.
It's not like having shared emotions for two different people.
Then I guess it's only Design for Living.
Well, Trouble in Paradise, definitely. But that, again, is a man and two women.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
No, this film is deeply, deeply fucked up by a double standard problem.
Again, like I said, it didn't cause, because I know the rest of his, well, I don't know the rest of his work, that's clear. Because I know other films of his, it didn't really give me that problem. The problem with it is that the characters have to be fools. You can't actually, particularly Jeanette MacDonald's character, you can't actually feel anything for them or their relationship, because for the plot to work, she has to be an idiot.
Yeah. It's just goofing around.
It really is just goofing
Nobody
around.
wants you to take this seriously.
Now, it starts very strong, though.
Yeah, it
so
does.
it was kind of disappointing.
Yeah.
How it ended up, or what it quickly turned into.
Let's just give a few sentence sketch of the whole thing for people.
I can't remember exactly how it starts. Oh, yes, of course.
There's Georges Barbier giving a pep talk to the police, saying that they have to clear the parks of all the lovers because people should be spending money in Parisian cafes.
Of Paris. And it just goes on and on and on, and he is the most not French-like seeming actor you can possibly imagine until we get to Love Me Tonight. And it's utterly hilarious as he delivers this. I don't know if you call it recitative in operetta when they speak rhyming lines instead of singing.
I think so.
But whatever you call it, it's an absolutely hilarious delivery.
Yeah, I love that guy. He is very prominent in a lot of Fox musicals later. He usually plays sort of cranky dads and bankers and that kind of thing.
And so the idea, which is very funny, is that, as Dave says, people are spending too much time fucking, and that means that they're not spending money, because they're enjoying themselves.
So they want people to come to Paris to sin, but they have to sin in public and spend money, not do it in free
public spaces, yes.
Yeah.
So the policemen are going off to enact their duty, and they come across Chevalier and Jeanette MacDonald making out. This already surprised me, because I assumed that every one of their movies would have a courtship. Like, that would be the plot.
Yeah, well, not this one.
Not this one. And so we see what appears to be, first of all, they make leering faces at the camera when they say that they're married.
Yeah.
So you assume that they're lying about it like everyone else, and we're going to see a naughty Lubitsch movie. We go back to the room, she's inviting him in. We're going to see a naughty Lubitsch movie about sin taking place behind a closed bedroom door in the pre-code era. Then Chevalier comes to address the camera.
Yeah, that's a great moment, right? Because when the policeman says, "You expect me to believe you're married?" and they both say, "Oh, please do."
Please.
It's quite wonderful.
Yeah.
And then, yes, he says, "You might not believe this, but look, I've got some documentary proof. Here's a photo from our wedding. Everything you're going to see that transpires between us or here behind the door, that's all lawful." And he has a song about it. How wonderful that it's all lawful.
It's actually really interesting to closely compare this to Same Year, Trouble in Paradise, because the wonder of that movie is how he, even though it's a comedy, he manages to make you feel very, very emotionally invested in both relationships. Well,
yes.
Emotionally invested in Herbert Marshall and Miriam Hopkins' relationship, but then sympathetic toward Kay Francis and their developing relationship as well.
That's how you see it. I feel more the other way around. I think I'm emotionally invested in the Kay Francis relationship and sympathetic towards Hopkins. I do feel like he's a better match with Kay Francis, but I don't dislike Miriam Hopkins. I don't think it's terrible that he winds up back with her at the end, but...
Well, there's such an insistence on what a good match he is with her, though.
Yeah.
Because they're both thieves.
I mean, I love both actresses, so...
You do. That just goes to show you the strength of the movie, though, that you can really take it either way.
Oh yeah, it's a million times better than this movie, and I liked this movie, but, you know, it's not Trouble in Paradise.
But you have this sort of melodrama, emotional investment in the relationship so that there's a weight to it and a weight to the possibility of infidelity, and yet it remains a comedy.
Yes.
So that's masterful, right? That's really unique. Well, it's not unique. Preston Sturges is also really good at having comedies that are also melodramas, but it's masterful.
Oh, it's a pretty incredible achievement, and this film is not even striving for that.
No, not at all. It's almost like Paramount just told them we need another Jeanette MacDonald and Maurice Chevalier.
They just really wanted to fool around this time. I think that you can't discount that possibility.
No, but you'd hope that it would have more fun results if that's what they were trying to do.
I don't know. I think it achieves what it aims to do almost perfectly, but it's very limited in ambition.
Is there actually anything more that we want to say about it?
Let's talk about the sexual politics that are at work here. I think that is really interesting, don't you?
Usually this sort of thing would annoy me a lot, but it didn't. For the reasons I've now given twice.
Forget about the rest of Lubitsch's oeuvre or any of that. We have to talk about this text by text, right? So this movie, what it is showing us is so unfair. What we can also talk about, I think, is in these films, both of them, one thing that they do share is maybe this is a thing that operettas did on the stage, I don't know, or maybe this is something that Lubitsch really pioneered, bringing in these goofball middle-aged suitors.
Although Charlie Ruggles does not play that character in the second movie, he plays a different character.
No, but Charles Butterworth does.
Yeah, another Charles steps in.
Yeah, so in this movie, though, we have Roland Young, who is the cuckolded husband, and we have Charles Ruggles, who is just a complete fool. Adolf.
So there's a false symmetry in that, in each case, it's the best friend of the husband or wife who wants to have an affair with the other.
Crazy mirror symmetry that doesn't at all play fair to poor Janet MacDonald, who just basically gets sexually assaulted by a buffoon in one scene.
That was a really strange scene. After Chevalier finally gives in and decides to go off with Jeanette MacDonald's friend.
Mitzi.
She
comes out of her room and Charles Ruggles is sitting there on her sofa in the dark, waiting to pounce on her.
And they do play it kind of melodramatically, like he's actually a threat for at least a few beats.
Yeah. But he's not really a threat, but he's a fucking sex pest.
That's true.
And he won't leave her alone. And it's true, like, she's not terrified or anything, but it's demoralizing.
Well, she is calling for help.
Yeah.
She is acting like, I guess you would if you found a strange man who had an obsession with you in your, well, not a strange man, a familiar man who had an obsession with you in your house in the middle of the night when your husband had just left.
She does get him to leave, and she acts like she feels sorry for him when she shoos him out the door.
Well, so do I. Like, I too had been afraid for her initially, and then when she actually gets rid of him and he just kind of literally leaves hanging his head, I too switched to pity at that point.
Yeah, and I think the movie wants you to feel that way. These are just sad fools. And I guess, I don't know, it's like reassurance to husbands out there that while you're out dallying, the worst that can happen is that a guy with no sex appeal at all will annoy your wife for a while and she'll make him leave.
Yeah, and then the payoff, the punchline for that is at the very end when the two of them have to reconcile.
He is complicit in the whole thing. The confession that she's eliciting from Charles Ruggles, Maurice Chevalier wants him to do it, and he's
broadly signaling to him.
He's like, whatever she says happened.
Because you're so completely asexual that even the fact that you molested my wife in no way bothers me, and I just have to make her think it does so that she'll think that she's had an equivalent experience.
Yeah, and in some other movie, it could be played as a two-way joke, right? Like where she is doing this and it seems to the husband like she's pretending that it happened, but it really did happen, and maybe she actually enjoyed herself. But it can't be that way because of the way Charles Ruggles is, and because of the scene that we saw. Right? Because you could see this going a different way, where he went out, and she actually did have sex with some guy that she enjoyed enough for that to happen, and then at the end she makes it seem like she's trying to make him confess to something that didn't really happen, and Chevalier is like, oh yeah, tell me all about it. And that would be a better joke on him.
I'm trying to think if there's any movie of this period, other than Design for Living, or of any period, really, other than maybe some really, really recent movie, that actually has a wife, like some kind of equivalence with the wife and husband both having affairs. And by recent, I mean movie within our own lifetimes. So well past the studio era.
Real consummated affairs? After the code really starts getting enforced, that can't really happen. It can only happen sort of by very oblique implication.
Yeah.
Palm Beach Story by Sturges does seem like maybe there could have been some kind
Rudy
of...
Valley is also a joke. I find him very sexy in that movie, which is bizarre, but I admit it.
I don't think you're alone, though.
Really? Well, I mean, he was the voice.
The man with the cock in his voice.
That's what he
called himself.
That's what he called himself in that documentary we saw. I don't know where his cock is in that movie.
Anyway, we're getting too far afield.
We're going wild like the movie.
With that scene, though, you could teach a whole course on that one scene, and it would really be an education in faux advanced sexual mores of the 1930s. It's like Hugh Hefner style sexual liberation is what we get from this whole film, right? Like, men can go do whatever they want, and women, as you said, are free to think about it a little.
Yeah, it's really anti-liberatory for a movie that is pretending to be very sexually open and naughty.
Yeah.
It is very disappointing of Lubitsch, actually. He's actually defying his own reputation here. I believe, I don't know why, I guess because they're more envelope pushing, therefore I believe that where Lubitsch really lived was something like Trouble in Paradise or Design for Living. Who knows what the production history of this movie is that it turned out this way.
No, we don't know. Maybe The Awful Truth is the closest we can think of to one where there does seem to be actual symmetry, possibly. But again, it's all very conjectural.
Well, it has to be, we know almost certainly that Cary Grant has been fucking around, but in terms of whether Irene Dunne has, it has to be much more ambiguous.
Well, okay, maybe you say that, but it's equally possible Cary Grant really did just go and hang out at the club and play poker for a week, right? He didn't go out anywhere. That's why he's got to get a fake tan. And Irene Dunne really did spend the night out with the handsome European music teacher. And she may have slept with him. We really don't know.
I guess. I mean, it does start on the note of his potential infidelity, which makes it seem more weighted toward that really happening. But I guess that could be a fake out.
Yeah.
A double fake out.
I think it is a double fake out. And in the end, it doesn't matter because they're perfect for each other. This movie, it doesn't really...
Well, the most interesting thing about it, definitely, is that you really believe that Chevalier, throughout the whole movie, that he is very sexually interested in his wife, which is not something that you see, well, you see it in The Awful Truth, but it's not something that you see a terrible lot, even in romantic comedies, unless it is a comedy of remarriage.
And you could call this a comedy of remarriage. Cavell probably would, if he wanted.
No. Anything that he doesn't like the tone of personally, like a relationship that he doesn't consider on a high spiritual plane, he will not call, like he doesn't like 20th Century for that reason.
Right. But I'm just saying he could if he wanted to, because he stretched the point way beyond legalities in his
genre
book.
Legalities. That's Pursuits of Happiness by Stanley.
Or marital legalities, right?
I see.
They didn't get divorced and get back together or even threaten to do so. It never really comes to that point.
No, he's going to play a role in someone else's divorce.
Yeah, he's a co-respondent. He's named. He's going to have to appear as the person who broke up Roland Young's marriage to Geneviève Tobin.
Which seems like the best for both parties.
Yeah,
In fact, you could have played this, it would have maybe been more interesting if you'd played this as she's actually using him for that purpose.
That would be interesting, I suppose. It seems clear that what the screenwriter...
Of course, she doesn't get any alimony then, so...
No. What the screenwriter's trying to do, what Lubitsch maybe seems to be trying to do, is just here is really just a portrait of a man who cannot resist sexual temptation. And that's the best you can say for this film, is really that Chevalier is giving his all to make us understand what it's like to be totally satisfied with your wife, and yet if another delightful young lady throws herself at you, you must have sex with her too. And he's talking to the men in the audience when he says, what would you do if this happened, right? And I think that tells us a lot about gender expectations at the time.
Well, that's really gross as well.
It is, but it's there.
This assumption that maybe all husbands are on the same page, because, like, being married, who wants that? Being married in itself, I can say from experience, feels like a trap.
Well, I've never been married.
Being married in itself can tempt you to have infidelities. That's our pronouncement on marriage. Love Me Tonight also plays heavily on the pre-existent persona of Maurice Chevalier, and it is very much a showcase for him.
It is, but it's a showcase for Rouben Mamoulian as well. What an incredible... I mean, this movie is one of the best movies ever made.
So I definitely saw this one in my 20s, but did not appreciate it.
Really?
No.
Oh.
No. Not like I did this time. And feeling very sad and sorry for ourselves that who knows when, I'm hoping it's going to be this very summer, but who knows when Cinematheque film going is going to resume and how in Toronto or the rest of the world, and what it would be like to see this movie on the big screen.
Yeah, I would like it. We would definitely appreciate a Mamoulian
You could do it. There's only a few. They're all worth seeing.
Each one is a gem.
And in their own way.
Yeah.
Like, I was thinking about what kind of mastery of comedy technique a movie like this requires, and how he could do that and also do straight-ahead tragedies like Applause and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Yeah, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde made the same year.
It's incredible, that kind of range. No wonder he didn't make many movies.
But he was making things for the stage a lot of the time, right? It's not like he was idle.
So Love Me Tonight, well, the other thing it has, besides Rouben Mamoulian, is of course a Lorenz Hart and...
Richard Rogers.
Rogers and Hart.
Score, which,
with many of their most famous songs, originated for this movie.
Yeah, terrific stuff there. Great supporting cast. I mean, this one has a much more expansive cast. The other one is really just a few people.
The inventiveness of this movie is non-stop.
A trademark of Mamoulian. We've seen it in other films of his that we've discussed. Notably Applause. Here you've got the Isn't It Romantic scene, which has been talked about by everybody, which carries the romantic strains of the Rogers and Hart song from the tailor's shop all the way across Paris and into the noble countryside where it reaches Jeanette MacDonald's ears.
But hilariously, nobody, except for, in a very funny way, Chevalier at the beginning of the song, and then Jeanette MacDonald in a more yearning register at the end, nobody's actually singing about romance. They're just deedly-dum and doing.
Yeah.
And singing about the activities that they're doing.
Chevalier's lyrics actually are just brutal, right? I mean, they're like Bobby Womack's Looking for a Love, where it's just like someone to make me my breakfast, and like, I mean, it's just...
Yes, but it's all done with a twinkle.
Yeah, but...
You're not supposed to take this seriously as where he's going to end up romantically, and it isn't.
Well, yeah, because that's the other thing that...
Isn't it anti-romantic, in other words?
Turns out to be one of the great romantic films, this movie, and I think everything is heartfelt here. It's such a shocking change in tone from...
Everything being very light and superficial and nudging and winking.
Here we've got real feelings, and Mamoulian is going to push them to the limit.
This enormous castle that Jeanette MacDonald is in. We'll get to that, but let's first talk about the appearance of Charles Butterworth.
Right.
So who is this guy? You know who this guy is.
Yeah, he is a famous character actor. He appears in many things. He was also a great friend of Robert Benchley and drinking buddies, right? They all lived at the Garden of Allah. This was the successor, really, to the Algonquin Round Table out in Hollywood. A lot of the Hollywood wits would gather at the Garden of Allah.
So he is 36 in this movie.
Yeah, that's amazing, because he looks older than us, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But he is not.
He looks a good 55 if he's a day.
You know, he never lived to 55.
No, he was killed in an automobile accident in which he lost control of his car.
Not long after Benchley died. He became despondent, and I guess he was never the same again.
His voice was the inspiration for Captain Crunch.
Oh, I can see it.
Or hear it.
He is really good. He turns up all over the place. He's in Magnificent Obsession as Robert Taylor's sidekick. He is Clark Gable's sidekick. They make a great comedy double act in Forsaking All Others, so check him out.
So
I fell flat on my flute. That's his trademark line from this film.
He was never a vaudevillian? He wasn't on the stage? He just walked around being a wit and showed up in movies?
I think so.
It's amazing how people got into movies in those days.
Well, Robert Benchley got into movies the same way, right? Like, well, he was a dramatic critic, and then all of a sudden he got offered a part in an actual stage play, and that went well, and then he went to Hollywood and did the same kind of crazy stuff that he did in short stories and little comedy pieces just on the screen.
So there's actually not a way to describe how funny his scene with MacDonald is. You just have to watch it. Plus it's comedy. You don't want us to describe it.
He has a ladder balcony scene with her.
The senescent suitor.
Yeah, the prematurely senescent suitor. So this is her situation. This is what she does for kicks, is fend off Charles Butterworth, which is almost not even worth fending off.
So the psychodrama here is that there's this count who lives in this enormous castle that looks like the Twin Peaks Purple Palace.
Yeah.
Just outside of Paris, where Maurice Chevalier works as a tailor, and the connection between him and the castle is Charles Ruggles.
Charles Ruggles is a ne'er-do-well nephew of the Count.
And all of these members of the aristocracy, most of whom are either senescent or prematurely senescent, all live in this castle and are all financially dependent on the Count. One who is not is the young and beautiful Jeanette MacDonald, who, however, is also being confined to the castle.
Well, she's sick, right? She's always fainting. She is in convalescence mode because she's been widowed. He's not keeping her prisoner.
Well, I thought it was the other way around, and the fact that she was being kept prisoner like everyone else was contributing to her condition, which is that she is a 22-year-old virgin who isn't even aware of the possibility of sex, basically.
Well, she was married for 3 years to a man in his 70s, yeah.
Yeah, 72. And we are to understand from her scene with the doctor that that marriage was not consummated.
Well, maybe not consummated well, anyway, if at all, yes.
It doesn't seem to have happened at all. She doesn't appear to be aware of the concept of sex, but she is in desperate need of it.
Yes. The doctor has a prescription for her, which is marriage immediately, and then he's informed that there's no one. The two eligible bachelors are 12 and 84 at this time, so he says, well then, exercise, exercise, exercise.
And there are quite a few scenes with a horse. After we meet her in the castle, we also pan to another room where three old ladies are concocting a love spell for her.
It's like Shakespeare.
Well, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
That is what it is.
Yeah.
And there's also hints, even though Bottom isn't a tailor, there's another tailor in that group of actors, of lower-class actors. It also has Midsummer Night's Dream overtones. It is based on a play,
So it has a stage antecedent.
a French play,
Le Tailleur.
The Tailor at the Castle.
Yeah.
So who knows where these references came from, but anyway, on the stage you would not see panning across an enormous mock-up of a castle in order to peer inside and see these three women at their work.
With the shadows on the wall behind them to create an eerie atmosphere.
And these three fates continually pop up in the course of the film, sometimes being naturalized as characters and sometimes playing this sort of meta role.
Yeah, it's interesting. Chevalier's world, I mean, that's what we actually see first, right? We see Paris first.
Paris waking up in the morning, even before the famous Isn't It Romantic sequence, there's the whole sequence of the noises of the awakening working class and petite bourgeois Paris.
Yeah.
Which made my heart very sad watching a city come to life, since many cities are not coming to life right now.
No.
Including ours.
No, our city is closed down one day, hopefully to reawaken. Chevalier hears it all and closes his window after a while. He says, it's great, but I don't want to hear it right now.
But before we see Chevalier, we actually see an image of him on the wall with the hat hanging.
Yeah, that's true.
A Chevalier caricature. So from that moment, we know that there is going to be a meta element, a meta commentary on him.
The
and
straw
his
boater.
persona. The boater gets another gag, meta gag later on, and also the characters are Jeanette and Maurice.
Yes, that's right. I always like that. There's a lot of movies that do this. They're not a lot, but some memorable ones, like The Sky's the Limit, where Fred Astaire plays Fred and Joan Leslie plays Joan.
Yeah, but there's not a Fred and Ginger one.
No, there isn't. There should be.
So then we also get introduced, we see Charles Ruggles show up and try to get money for Maurice Chevalier out of his uncle. We meet Myrna Lloyd, another sex-crazed young woman, but this one is aware of it.
And she's really fun.
Who's also dependent. Yeah, I wish she had even more to do, actually. Who's also dependent on the uncle. Or
yeah.
the count.
C. Aubrey Smith is the actor. He's a wonderful actor. He turns up all over the place as well in the 30s and 40s. Although usually he plays more of a stiff upper lip general kind of guy. But he can loosen up and do this kind of thing too, just as well.
He talks to, I think, his butler at one point about how everyone is engaged in the household, and he's reassured that they're all engaged in healthy bridge playing.
Yes, he
nice,
loves
healthy
it.
Bridge playing. He's so happy about that. And then we get a tour of the place where we discover that other than Jeanette and Myrna Loy, yeah, everybody's in their 90s and falling asleep who are not playing bridge. And I was reminded of the old folks home in Chinatown.
Sure. Or in The Irishman.
Sure.
Or in many other films.
Except that these people are all extremely rich. Actually, they're very rich in Chinatown, too. I think that's why I thought of it. The movie makes, both in its filming style, in the stylistic tricks that it's constantly using, and in the world it creates, there is no attempt at realism. It's a fantasy world.
Yeah, Midsummer Night's Dream. With this base in urban living, right? Where our hero sets forth from the city and he has real day-to-day economic concerns. He's opened a tailor shop. He has one customer that actually pays him, which is Bert Roach. We've been seeing him a lot lately in different things. And he comes out and he's so pleased and he sings a song about how he feels beautiful now and he can get married. Charlie Ruggles shows up and he has ordered 16 suits. He owes Chevalier like 40,000 francs. But, of course, he can't pay it. He's got to find some way to come up with money. Chevalier's, his shop is going to go under if this doesn't work out. It's pretty clear that he's
the only merchant in Paris who realizes that this aristocrat, who doesn't realize that this aristocrat won't pay.
Well, not the only one, because he talked all of his friends, the hatter and the shirt maker. They all made stuff on order for this guy, and he's not going to pay any of them.
Well, this head of the retail association or whatever he is shows up quite a bit too late.
Yeah.
To bring the bad news.
What are they paying him for? He's supposed to show up before.
Why didn't he send an email?
Yeah. All of that is very grounded in reality, right? Even though we've had a kind of symphony of the city beginning, here we get real concerns. Chevalier sets forth on his mission, and if he doesn't come back with the money, it's all over. He's going to be out on the street.
But on the way, he runs into Jeanette MacDonald, singing the tune Lover to herself, but punctuating it with very banal
commands to her horse.
Yes, which is absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
Then they have their meet cute, where she is in denial of the fact that she is attracted to him, familiar from
Fred and Ginger movies.
millions of movies, but particularly Fred and Ginger movies. And he decides the way into her heart is to sing her the most vulgar little song he can think of, this is a fantastic. I defy you to get this worm out of your ear after you hear it.
You funny little good-for-nothing Mimi.
And his French vaudevillian delivery with the waggly eyebrows and the muttering of the line about the son of the Mimi and I want a little son of a Mimi by and by, and then her face when he says it. And
it is vulgar.
it's very vulgar indeed. It's very forward.
Yes. We also understand right away that he is deeply in love with her for real.
Sure.
Even though he can't express it any other way but by talking about impregnating her.
Well, there's obviously much, again, in contrast to 1 Hour with You. I don't know about the other Chevalier MacDonald movies, but in this one there is a class difference that corresponds to their personas and to their backgrounds in different kinds of musical theater.
Yeah, perfect. Form follows function here.
And so his vulgarity is also an expression of his class.
Yeah. And then he's going to actually parody that and take himself down even one peg lower when he does his Apache song.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating. But that's later.
Magnificent.
Yeah. He loves her, but he doesn't know if he'll ever see her again. She says maybe in another 1,000 years.
Well, it's actually exactly the way that he meets Mitzi in the other movie.
Yeah, pretty much. Here, obviously, the audience knows that the place he is headed for is her home. So we're prepared for them to meet again. They part momentarily.
And then we get the disguised identity plot, so to be used later in Bringing Up Baby.
Well, this is a tremendous scene, right? He just walks in, up incredible flights of stairs.
Oh, well, I don't know if it's the first use of the movie of sped-up photography, so Mamoulian just throws every bit of trick photography in the book that he can think of at this movie, and a lot of it made me think of early cartoons, but who's getting started? Like, the Fleischer brothers are getting started by this time, I'm sure.
Yeah, sure. Betty
Disney?
Boop. Yeah, they're all starting in the early 30s. Warner Brothers as well, but none of them are at their kind of mature phase.
Watching this movie would make you think that it had been influenced by cartoons, but cartoons are basically just getting started.
There are a lot of cartoons that I can remember where there are scenes like that stag prancing around.
Which scene are you talking about?
The stag sort of jumping and the music playing in a sort of tinkling register.
Oh, you mean during the hunting scene?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we'll definitely spend a lot of time with that because I think that's great. Here, though, Chevalier is kind of going up and up and up staircases. He doesn't find anyone anywhere in this gigantic chateau. And he goes back down to where he was before, and he finally finds his way into a room where C. Aubrey Smith is, and they start up a conversation about how to dust properly.
Dust armor.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing about Chevalier, I mean, there's a lot of interesting things about his character. We first meet him in his Apache outfit.
Yeah.
Which gives one kind of connotation. Then he switches into his tailor.
He's a tradesman.
His tailor garb.
He's not a criminal.
And then he switches into his Chevalier look, which I guess denotes yet another Parisian class. I'm not sure which one exactly.
Boulevardier.
A Boulevardier, yeah, right. So basically someone who could be of any class, but who is affecting style and a certain kind of lifestyle.
There's a lot of class confusion here. Chevalier thinks he's talking to a servant.
Sorry. And then I was going to say, but he is so into his profession that it gives him a weird kind of metrosexual vibe in that he's very, very interested in women's fashion. Well, anyone's fashion.
And fabrics.
But women's too.
Yeah.
Right? He's going to tell Jeanette MacDonald how to make herself over on a few occasions.
So yeah, he strikes up a conversation with C. Aubrey Smith where there's a lot of confusion both ways about who is who and what's even happening here. They are both talking about Charlie Ruggles at one point, and C. Aubrey Smith confides that he hates his nephew.
Well, but I don't think that's any surprise to Charlie Ruggles. Charlie Ruggles actually gets in there's some great three-way comedy between Charlie Ruggles, Charles Butterworth, and C. Aubrey Smith, where everyone's getting digs in at each other, and the timing is just unbelievable.
I can't think of any flaws with this film.
No.
No, it is
flawless.
a perfection. When Ruggles finally arrives, he bustles Chevalier out of the room and ascertains that nothing's been given away yet. So he says, look, why don't you just stay here? We'll find some way over the course of the week to get this money to you. Don't blow my cover. Don't tell everyone that I owe money all over Paris, because I'll be thrown out and you'll be thrown out and you won't get any money either. And Chevalier doesn't want to do it until he realizes that Jeanette MacDonald lives here.
Right. At the
Then
point...
he's totally like, oh yeah, I guess whatever, I'll stay here under any pretense.
At the point where he was shouting, I love you, after her in the middle of the road, then we knew that he was pretty well hooked. I guess within the genre, it makes sense that he's immediately in love with her because he heard her singing. He heard her singing to herself about the love that she wants, but she doesn't know that she wants.
It all makes sense.
Yeah.
You can root for this because he's an underdog. He's got to prove that he's not just this uncouth fellow who talks about impregnating women that he's in love with.
However charmingly.
Yeah, will he learn in time to make her see the purity of his emotions?
Well, I mean...
And will it matter at all when she finds out that he's just a tailor?
It turns out that his emotions are pretty pure. And
Yeah, they
we get
are.
an example of that in the next hunting scene. There's the convention that happens in other movies of smoke someone out who's trying to pretend to be an aristocrat or hang out with aristocrats by making them participate in a hunt with the wildest horse that you've got.
First, Butterworth tries to set him up with a bad horse.
This is the way this is all done, it's a real cartoon movie comedy sensibilities long before Tashlin got famous for doing that.
Yeah. So there's a bad horse that Chevalier doesn't want any part of because he's never been on a horse. He is an urban creature.
Well, his rival sets him up with that horse, but
Yeah.
Jeanette MacDonald is even crueler.
Well, she is, but as we see from her reaction, she never intends for him to actually get on the horse. She just wants to expose him.
She has underestimated this man,
Yeah,
our
the
hero.
depth of his passion, because when he finds out what solitude is all about, he still goes through with it.
But the cartoon part is where we get the shot of the shack where Solitude is kept, and it just has danger written all over it, and several men having to handle the horse as it comes out.
Oh yeah, the horse actually kicks the walls down. That is an unruly beast. He gets on the horse, and she starts to really freak out because she thinks maybe she's going to be party to his death. The film speeds up, and he takes off for parts unknown. The rest of the hunting party goes out looking for the stag, and then we spend quite a little bit of time with the object of their quest, the quarry.
Stags can be scary looking, but this is the most soft and gentle looking little stag you ever saw in your life.
Yeah, and it's just doing ballet moves through the forest, bouncing, 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 and the music really keeping time with each bounce. The stag doesn't seem that concerned with all these hounds and monstrous hunters.
No, we don't get a lot of shots with it looking fearfully over its shoulder.
No, because the movie knows it's going to save the stag, and you feel this is not like many movies we've seen where we're going to see all kinds of animals wholesale slaughtered. Mamoulian does not want.
Were you thinking of Bresson?
Well, Bresson, but also Règle du Jeu.
Yeah, right.
And others, you know.
Gone to Earth?
Yeah, exactly. But here, the stag, we don't know exactly what the stag's plan is, but it doesn't seem too perturbed. We don't know what's become of Chevalier, and here we follow Jeanette MacDonald. She seems to be ahead of everyone else. She's a great equestrian.
Right.
Her horse, she follows the lead hounds all the way to some kind of cabin out, like a fairly nice cabin out in the woods.
And suddenly it's Rock Hudson in All That Heaven Allows.
Yeah, she walks in, she finds Chevalier feeding oats to the stag.
And looking a little bit roughed up from his time with Solitude.
Yeah, he said, we parted ways, but I've made friends with this much more congenial creature here. Look at the stag. And she's like, you're making a mockery of the traditions of the aristocracy. This is disgusting. And he's like, no, look at the stag. Look at his eyes.
And then he meets her eyes.
Yeah.
Right.
But then, yeah, and she softens when she sees the stag as well. And they all realize that there's no reason to be killing this poor little guy. He's tired. They're going to put him to bed.
But then the payoff is when everybody arrives all the dogs and all of the aristocrats arrive for the hunt, Chevalier comes out and tells him, the stag is tired! Shh, you're gonna wake the stag! He's tired, he's sleeping! And then shoos them away, and they all prance off in slow motion, and
with no soundtrack.
I was crying with laughter.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Yeah, because Chevalier, he's been introduced as the Baron of something. Everyone accepts him as a member of the aristocracy or nobility. And this is just some guy that's gonna wake everyone up from their weird bridge playing days.
At this point, Chevalier is basically a manic pixie dream girl.
Yeah, he is.
But he has magical control, sort of, to some extent anyway, over the environment.
Yeah.
And even over it's kind of active filmic magic that he performs when he sends them off that way.
Because they accept him as a social equal who just has some new crazy ideas that seem fun for the day. They're not going to stop hunting probably in the future, although I wish they would.
Well, Jeanette MacDonald might.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, we know she will.
Yes, she's not going to be living that life anymore, thankfully. But the rest of them, who knows what their future plans are, but for this day, the stag will live. The stag will be allowed to sleep in peace in someone's bed in there. Through it all, there is Charles Butterworth trying to undermine Chevalier. He's the only one that isn't charmed by him. He wants to do research to uncover the charade.
But in another movie, he'd be much more of a dark threat. This movie doesn't even really have any dark threats.
No, not really, except for the general possibility that they won't actually wind up together because of class differences.
Yeah, the general snobbery. That's the important, the darkest scene that we get. Although it's still magnificent.
Yeah, it is.
How do they end up getting together exactly?
Well, there's a bunch of things that happen, right? So Charles Butterworth finishes his research. He spends a whole day going through all the books about the history of aristocracy in France, and he says there's no one by this name. There is no noble house by this name. Charles Ruggles, thinking quickly, says, well, times being what they are, many people cannot go by their correct names, and everyone just assumes, okay, well, this is a deposed member of foreign royalty. They talk about the Habsburg lip. So, yeah, that's possible. He could be some kind of descendant of the Habsburgs. There is no more Austrian Empire in 1932.
Well, this is like the Lady Eve scene.
Yeah.
Right? Where
I think you're talking about Eric Bloor.
Yes, where Eric Bloor is dropping rumors and hints about the pedigree of the Lady Eve.
Right.
Right, in order to distract people from, throw them off the scent of really trying to track down who she is.
Yeah, but William Demarest knows she's positively the same dame.
Well, yeah, and William Demarest actually, he would be a darker threat in that movie, except he's far too goofy.
Well, sure, and he's the best friend of Henry Fonda, so it's not quite the same thing. He's not a romantic rival.
True, but
neither really is Charles Butterworth.
But he really wants to get to the bottom of this dame problem.
That's true. Everything comes to a head, actually. Well, there's the Apache sequence, which is tremendous. And it again shows us the class as destiny thing that the movie is rising above, right? He's saying, look, what can I do? I have all these tender feelings, but people expect a certain thing from me, so I can't tell women that I love them. I have to behave in this brutal manner towards them.
It's actually a very amazing dramatic performance from Chevalier.
He's a really good actor, one of the great early 30s stars, and he does disappear for a long time after the code comes in.
Right. And then ultimately we get the full story of this Apache's background and realize that he is constrained by his social circumstances.
Very thoughtful film.
Apache, that must be a politically incorrect reference to Apache.
Well, of course it is. Of course it is. It's always in quotation marks, but that's the only word that the French would have used for it's basically just a gangster, a low-class gangster is what an Apache is, with particularly a penchant for being brutal to women.
Well, and it also developed into a form of dance that sometimes turned up dilutedly in Hollywood movies.
Oh, yeah.
A form of dance style with the brutal male in his typical striped white and black striped shirt and his slit-skirted female companion that he would throw around, as Chevalier describes in the scene.
Yeah,
or in the song.
The most non-diluted presentation I can think of in a Hollywood film is in The Razor's Edge, which has some really brutal scenes. in a cafe.
No, I don't even remember that.
Anne Baxter reduced to opium addiction and getting beaten up by her sulky brute of a boyfriend.
That's not a dance, though.
Well, there is some dancing there.
Is there?
Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, often it's just sort of used for its balletic properties. Gene Kelly, doesn't he do one?
I feel like he does. It must be in An American in Paris, but it's somewhere in there, I think.
Yeah. So all of that happens, and this is a costume ball, so he comes as himself, basically, or a debased version of himself.
Well, one of the personas we've seen him adopt early in the film. Anyway, he seems to have a few different selves.
But no, he's never a brutal person in any of his real selves. He is a philanderer, for sure, because we see him strolling through his Parisian neighborhood.
Oh, that's
and
right.
All the women. But he is like a lover, not a fighter. He's not a guy that goes around beating people up.
Certainly.
But in that
But obviously
song,
he likes to affect the style sometimes.
And this turns on a bunch of the women, which is problematic in itself, but whatever, this is...
Well, it's not too surprising that it turns on Myrna Loy, because she's not a particularly serious character. She says that the only thing she fantasizes or thinks about other than men are schoolboys, whatever that means.
Probably my favorite line reading of hers. It's justly famous, I think. Could you go for a doctor? And she's like, could I? Bring him right in.
Oh yeah, she's great in her little moments.
And, Myrna Loy is not new in Hollywood at this point, but she had been stuck playing Eurasian temptresses and all kinds of terrible characters. This is a great little moment that shows what she could do. And I think it probably was instrumental in getting her more into the screwball comedy type roles that we love her for now.
Sure. So ultimately, Chevalier and MacDonald end up in a garden together and exchange enough kisses and slaps that it becomes clear that they love each other.
Yeah, this is really heartfelt and also a little disturbing, right? Because he takes liberties and gets hit for it.
Well, he kisses her in her sleep and he gets a lot of slaps and...
Yeah.
But it's a typical... I mean, we've already seen that Jeanette MacDonald is self-dissociated.
Yes.
But she comes to her senses in this scene.
She slaps him to her senses.
Exactly. They exchange vows of love no matter what happens.
And she says she loves him, and he says, well, you don't even know who I am, really. And she says, well, whatever you are. But of course, she's thinking that he is an incognito Habsburg when she says that.
Then we get another very remarkable sequence in that you see Chevalier sleeping and dreaming of a perfect outcome where he reveals that he's a tailor and she's very accepting.
Yeah.
And then they sing Love Me Tonight to each other, but they sing it to each other in their minds while they're sleeping with a split screen.
Yeah, it's really wonderful.
And it's hard to know, are they dreaming this together or are they in their sleep remembering the song in the garden? But anyway, what's amazing is that he decides to withhold the actual showing of them singing the theme love song to each other.
Yeah, it's true.
And we just get images of these smiling, sleeping people.
Really good. The big reveal happens. He outs himself as a tailor, basically, when he comes in. She's getting a new riding outfit because
he just can't resist his profession. He just loves it so much.
And she's doing all of this because he already told her that her riding outfit is no good. And he said he was imagining her without those clothes at one point.
Right.
Which is actually a double entendre that I laughed at a lot.
Yes, you did.
And I guess this is like a famous couturière.
Incidentally, Jeanette MacDonald's best comedy scene in this movie is, of course, the scene with the doctor.
Yeah.
And the way that the expression on her face when she finally gives in and takes her clothes off, and then the Mamoulian camera going up and down her lingerie body, which reminds you that this is the man who made Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Yes.
That only moment. Because generally speaking, it's not quite as constantly lascivious as the Lubitsch operettas.
No, that's true.
In that movie, there are women in their lingerie, very low-cut lingerie, sporting their 34-inch breasts throughout the whole film.
That's true. He comes in and he sees this famous couturière putting the finishing touches on the new stylish riding outfit. And he starts out to compliment it, but then when he really looks at it, he realizes there's all kinds of problematic aspects to it, and he starts pulling at the cuffs and pulling at the collar. The woman who designed this is infuriated and runs out screaming that she's been insulted.
Right, and then the chorus of the three fates comes running after her.
She's been insulted!
And everybody makes the same comment in a different form, misinterpreting that.
Yes.
Which is very dryly funny.
It is, yeah. The whole troupe, the whole aristocratic troupe comes in and finds MacDonald and Chevalier in a clinch as he puts his arms around her semi-nude torso. The only thing that he can say in his defense is that he was actually planning to redo her outfit. And of course nobody believes this. But in movies and in other kinds of stories, you always have to give someone a chance to prove that they're not lying. That's what they agree to here. In 2 hours, he's going to redo the outfit and prove that that's what he was doing.
It's almost like Clooney Brown, although that is a Lubitsch movie, who is also just as obsessed with her profession and just can't stop herself from practicing it, even if it's going to
really
upset everybody and completely undermine her plans, because as soon as this is completed, Jeanette and MacDonald is like, so how exactly have you managed to do this?
Yeah, no, this is a man who has a Hawksian devotion to his profession, although Howard Hawks would never do a movie about a tailor.
Especially not a tailor who is just as interested in making women's clothes, no?
No. Although Howard Hawks was very interested in how his female stars were tailored.
That's true, oddly. No, maybe he would make a movie like this.
He didn't, though.
He could have. This character might as well be Howard Hawks.
Says, what is wrong with you? You're a Habsburg. How did you make this beautiful garment? And he has to say, it's because I am a tailor. And yeah, she really looks blindsided here.
And we haven't said enough about how Mamoulian is getting Chevalier to play all these scenes for pathos.
It can't be stressed enough. Especially it needs to be insisted upon, because in the first movie we talked about, there are no stakes, there are no real emotions.
And he's just a gross eyebrow wriggler.
Yeah. No, here he is a man desperately in love with this woman, also desperately in love with being a tailor. These two things just don't go together, and it just feels inevitable that he's going to lose the woman, not the tailoring. He's hoping that she really meant it when she said that she didn't care. Brings that back up. He's like, remember you said you didn't care who I was or where I was from?
I was thinking of the scenes we've described a few times in this series for movies of this period where a man finds out that the woman he's in love with is a prostitute.
Yeah, it's about on the same level. That's the way the film conveys it.
He initially can't handle it at all.
Yeah.
And acts like a complete jerk.
Yeah.
That's what she does.
She does. And she just runs off, and then everyone else becomes a chorus of people shrieking that he's a tailor.
Oh, so it's not just the couple of opening sequences with the Paris working sounds, and then isn't it romantic contagion? Then there's a couple of other song contagions that are just as good, or almost. There's the Mimi after the first night that he spends with them.
Yeah, see, Aubrey Smith in particular does pretty much the whole song in his bedroom.
So hilarious. And then everybody inappropriately singing this inappropriate song.
Yeah, the three fates, the three women as well at their needles.
Yeah, and a bunch of different people sing it, and it's just hilarious.
With no gender transposition either.
No, right?
They sing it as if they were men singing to a woman.
Am I the guy?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we get another Contagion song, which is going through the entire castle, which is kind of a bookend to the Paris song, because we see all of the different social levels in the castle.
And all of them look down upon tailors.
Of course, and we know this from many and many a movie, that the servants have internalized the class distinctions even more than the aristocrats have.
Sure. We get Robert Gregg, who's been in it the whole time, but this is where he really comes to the fore, the head butler, right? Like, this guy is all over the place. He's in Sturges films. He's in Marx Brothers films. He is one of maybe the greatest of the butlers, although Eric Blore is a different kind of great butler as well.
And of course, now there's also Lonely Wives.
Well, yeah, that butler, his mind was very active.
We really love that guy.
Yeah. And Chevalier leaves in disgrace.
The wit of Loren's heart is mind-blowing in this final sequence. The way that he personalizes, that he tailors for each one of the characters invented for this sequence, their reaction, their particular snobby reaction to this discovery. Yeah, and then we see Chevalier walking out on his own steam, but when he looks up at the butler and the footman or the doorman or whatever he is, they are towering above him.
He's been laid low, he's had a terrible experience out amongst the nobility, and he's gonna go back to Paris with his tail between his legs.
Of course, though, we feel that this is all very unfair, and it is, but I think you feel like Chevalier is going to be okay.
Well, yeah, but he's lost this woman that he clearly is in love with.
Yeah, and in a very terrible way.
Yeah.
And then we see her, so it ends on her.
It does end on her. She takes over the subjectivity for the end of the film, which I think is great.
But I mean, the song ends on her, initially, in her office, still brooding about this problem.
Yeah.
And then she watches him through her window, disappearing, and then we get a series of great dissolves and superimpositions of images, where she is the road that he's wandering down out of the palace gates.
She sees all of it in her mind's eye.
Yeah. And
the
then,
man she loves leaving her life because of her snobbery.
And then we also get a reprise of Love Me Tonight, which we don't even know if there was a real world in which they sang this to each other, or if this is a continuance of the mental connection.
Yeah.
And then, of course, she makes her decision.
Yes.
And this, we've always been, for many years of this podcast, I don't know on what occasion it actually started, but we've been trying to figure out what is the earliest romantic run at the end of a movie. This is pretty early.
Yeah, it's 1932, and it really is just like a lot of romantic comedy endings. She must get there in time to stop him from leaving her life. She gets on the fastest horse.
She gets on Solitude.
Chases down this train.
Yeah.
And she actually catches up to it, yells at him out through the window, and he says, no, you can't come to Paris and live my demeaning little life. You have to stay here in your palace. And she...
Of course, we know her life in the palace is awful.
Yeah. So he's already said, no, forget it. And she continues on to the engineer, and he says, this is not a railroad problem. I'm not stopping.
Well, she says, I love him.
Yeah.
This is not a railroad problem.
That's amazing.
So then she decides to make it a railroad problem.
Yes, she does. She puts herself on the tracks, standing like the Statue of Liberty, daring them to drive through her. And of course, they do stop just in time. I mean, that's pretty heroic for MacDonald, and she really is up to conveying the intensity of these emotions.
Well, he's a very heroic guy, so she has to prove that she's worthy of him now.
Yeah, she has to make up for her terrible snub of him.
Yes.
And she does. It really all does feel exactly right for their final embrace.
And then they disappear in a cloud of train smoke.
Back to the city.
But it ends on the three fates. We didn't even mention how they are transformed into yapping dogs when they come running downstairs to communicate the tailor information.
That's true, they do.
So they have not served a uniformly benign role in this film and don't seem to have, for most of it, any greater awareness of what's going on than anyone else. Far from it, but at the end they are again turned into the orchestrators of this whole plot.
They did it. They did it all. They provide a satisfying coda to the whole thing, I think, as they complete their tapestry.
That's right.
And that's the end.
I was just looking this up. The cartoons are all getting started at this same period. So Mickey Mouse debuts in 1928.
Yeah, Steamboat Willie.
Looney Tunes gets started in 1930. Merry Melodies in 1931. But the Tex Avery period does not get started till 1935. And so I'm just not, as someone who knows more about the history of cartoons than I do, would have to say whether they are sophisticated enough at this early point to have been any kind of influence on this film. I mean, I'm sure there are silent film precedents.
Some of those Betty Boop cartoons would have existed already, like the You Want to Be a Member thing. I think that's like 1931, isn't it?
Fleischer Brothers? Let me see.
Bimbo's Initiation? Is that what it's called?
Fleischer Studios, founded in 1921. The first character was Coco the Clown in 1924. Fitz the Dog becomes Bimbo in 1930.
Yeah.
Don't know when he becomes Betty's boyfriend. Because he's initially her dog, and then for a while it's both. Well, she was a dog originally, too.
Yeah.
Betty becomes a human character by 1932. Yeah, well, they're late 20s, early 30s as well.
But what year is Bimbo's initiation from?
1931. But I'm just thinking of things that I pointed out, like, well, there's the sped up photography for comic effect, and there's the slow down photography, and there's the danger warning stuff with solitude.
Yeah.
All of that sort of thing, all that kind of cartoon sensibility. I don't know if that's pre-established in certain silent films.
Could be.
That the cartoons are drawing on, or if he is just somehow coming up with the same ideas at the same time, because there's no reason you need, if you're freeing yourself from realism, there's no reason why a movie can't be like a cartoon.
Mamoulian says, why not?
There's no reason why you couldn't make the same type of comedic discoveries just thinking about film as a medium, you know, which later Tashlin and Jerry Lewis will do as well. So this is all interesting to think about, but not stuff that we know anything about.
No. We're just musing out loud. If you want to contribute or enlighten us, please do.
What else do we have to talk about this week?
Well, no films were seen in the cinema because they're all closed once again.
We can report that again.
We'll probably report that every week for the next few months or however long it takes for our world to weather the current crisis.
But we can still use the ending here to mention anything else we find noteworthy in our movie experiences of the past week. Saw the Borzage. Is it certain now that we want to say Borzage? Because everyone seems to say Borzage now.
Yeah, let's do Borzage.
We're switching to Borzage. Okay. We saw the Borzage, A Farewell to Arms. What did you think of that?
Wow, it's an incredible film.
It's even less faithful in most ways than the Selznick, although in a couple of ways it was more faithful. It, like, again, having recently listened to the audiobook, I don't think there are two sensibilities that could possibly be more opposed to each other in terms of their thinking about death than Hemingway and Borzage.
Yes. And this movie is a Borzage film.
Oh, yeah.
With some script elements from Hemingway, right? That are transmogrified to serve Borzagian ends.
I could see Hemingway just absolutely despising that ending, whereas the Selznick ending is actually, it's a little bit Hollywoodized, but it's pretty fearfully faithful to Hemingway's ending.
Don't touch me.
We didn't even talk about how Jennifer Jones is made up to look like a corpse at the end of that movie.
It's true, where Helen Hayes looks quite beatific as she gets ready to ascend to the heavens.
And starts talking about how brave she is, which is not the correct use of that dialogue.
Right. No, I'm glad we have both films. And I could stand seeing a film that actually is more faithful to the Hemingway. I don't know who would make that, like Paul Verhoeven or something. I don't know.
What? Why would you think that Paul Verhoeven is the right person to translate Hemingway's vision of the absolute absurdity of death? Like, after seeing the...
Paul Verhoeven, I think, would do a great job of accurately conveying the complete nihilism that comes out of the experience of war and seeing all of your hopes die.
Oh my god, you know what? Sorry, I was still thinking over the movie, and I heard Paul Schrader.
No.
I was like, what are you talking about?
Paul Verhoeven's A Farewell to Arms. Let's see that.
But could he communicate the purity of the love story is the question. Well, maybe. We did see that really early weird film of his.
I think he could.
What was that called? The 70s one.
Turkish Delight.
Sure, that had a kind of love story.
It does.
A very particular kind of love story. So after seeing that Borzage ending, it made me think about a line in the novel that doesn't show up. I don't think it could possibly show up. It doesn't show up in either of the movie versions, which is the vision that neither movie quite gets at, but certainly the Borzage doesn't. When the protagonist wonders or thinks to himself, this is the price that you pay for having sex.
Yeah.
Like, why? Just why? Why is this the result of that? It just doesn't add up, does it?
The kind of connection the human mind makes, the masochistic human mind that wants to punish itself for enjoying anything in this terrible world.
No, but he's not, I don't think he's castigating himself. He's just saying this is a ridiculous life if this is the result of having sex. It doesn't make any sense. It's just senseless. Just utterly senseless. Thing that it does get better than the Selznick movie is how absolutely guiltless Gary Cooper is about becoming a deserter.
Oh yeah. No.
Although it gives him a different motive, which is that his love.
Yeah.
Right?
No, but for sure, that is the most Borzagian element of the whole film, that he just checks out at a certain point and does not feel any kind of remorse about it, any kind of loss of manhood for abandoning the fight against the Central Powers. Who cares?
Yep. And similarly, it also gets right the initial, when he gets injured. In the Selznick movie, there's some big action movie bit of bedazzlement as Rock Hudson is swinging down that lift.
But that's not where he gets injured. He does get his leg blown up just when they're sitting around next to their ambulances. But it's not as prosaic a scene as eating cheese in a dugout.
Yeah, I think in the novel they're just sitting around having some sandwiches and then
yeah.
But what this movie misses is that, or the Borzage movie misses, is that that's also the moment where he sees one of the men die.
Right.
Which makes it even more a companion to the pointlessness of Jennifer Jones's death, even though that is more meaningful to him.
It's true. Poor Henry Armetta could have gotten killed, or Fortunio Bonanova. Those two guys are his sidekicks in the 1932 version, and they didn't actually get killed.
Adolphe Menjou is surprisingly great.
Well, he is great. He has a little bit less to do than De Sica had, but he really does a great job with the character as written.
I think it just lets you know that character will work. It's just one of those dramatic characters that will just work no matter what.
Hey, baby.
Yeah, like how can you not have fun playing that? It obviously communicates how fun it is to play. And who even knows what's going on with this character? I guess there's been some speculation that
he loves
that he's homosexual.
Yeah.
Well, in this movie particularly, actually each of them have a homoerotic friend that interferes with their relationship.
That's true. Yeah, Mary Phillips is Ferguson.
But I think that probably is. I mean, it's taken further and affects the plot a lot more in Borzage's version, but I think that probably is true to what's going on in the Hemingway version. Ferguson becomes even more hysterical.
Right.
Hemingway novel.
The Menjou character really doesn't seem interested in going to the brothel unless Gary Cooper's with him.
Sure.
Like, it seems like he needs Gary Cooper there to get an erection.
And Borzage doesn't seem particularly hysterical about this, even though basically Adolphe Menjou is responsible for killing Catherine Helen Hayes in this movie.
Yeah, he is. And he feels terrible remorse about it. He does come around at the end and realize that he's been keeping true love.
Because the movie actually gives a reason for her dying in childbirth, which is that she's so upset.
Yeah.
About having her letters returned to her.
But that's not the book, is it?
Oh god, no.
No.
The book, it's just, like, nobody even expects this to happen. There's that little hint about her having narrow hips.
Yeah.
And that's it.
So, again, the Selznick film is more accurate. Like, the
Selznick film is much more accurate overall. And it really, it really made me appreciate how faithful it is, other than age, to the Catherine Barclay character.
Yeah, but Helen Hayes is older, too.
Yeah, she's in her early 30s. And we did say this, but I guess I kind of underestimated or underplayed it, how perfect Jones really is for that role, because of how neurotic and in pieces she is initially, and how mercurial she is throughout.
Yeah.
And how few actresses would really fit that, or be able to play it in any way that seems plausible.
No, a perfect choice for Selznick as his leading lady in his final project.
Alright, I guess we've talked enough for today. This is a good time. We're kind of operating on half power at the moment. The disruptions everyone has been experiencing in their lives has led to, we assume, has led to the sudden drop-off in listeners.
Stock market crashed, and so have our download numbers, but there's still, a good 50, 60 people downloading. So.
I'm not going to flatter ourselves that the people remaining are the ones who are our super fans. I assume, or I hope, if you're listening, that means that your lives have not been too terribly disrupted, and if they have, that we are giving you great comfort and joy with our little podcast. However, this is a moment where we will ask for, you can do your parts to warm our little heart in this world without even contributing anything financially, since we do not have a Patreon. But if you haven't done it yet and you just want to leave a 5-star review, even if you don't feel the full 5 stars, what it will do is, if you get any enjoyment out of this podcast and think other movie lovers would too, it just makes us visible.
Yeah, sure. We could use your help, and we could also use, your emails. Send us some letters out there. Let us know how you're doing, whether movies are playing as significant a role in your shut-in life as they are in ours.
Whether all of your movie theaters, all your cinematheques have been shut down too, and you're not sure if they'll ever come back.
Yeah, well, if you're in any of the affected countries. I hope they are, because it's the only way we're going to get out of this.
Well, yes, of course, but it still feels sad.
It does. So next week, speaking of Jennifer Jones, as we just were, we're actually going in for our final Jones episode. The Acteurist Oeuvre Review goes out with Tender is the Night.
I'm looking forward to that, as I say every time.
And The Idol, which neither of us have ever seen.
We don't know anything about it. I'm a little iffy about The Idol, which I think she made after Selznick died, and she was not in the best state of mind, but...
Maybe it's a triumph. Maybe it is not the way she would have preferred to go. Who knows? We'll find out next week in our final Jennifer Jones episode.
Oh, and I guess we can also announce at this point that we, despite the fact that we're not going to be able to see the rest of the movies in the theater, okay, well, we're making the assumption that the Lightbox is not coming back in April. I hope we're proved wrong. Actually, I hope we're not proved wrong, because this Ontario still needs to be shut down.
We're not even close to the peak.
We're going to be watching those movies at home, the rest of the Stewart movies, but we still will be doing our Jimmy Stewart retrospective episode.
Yeah, a little housekeeping here. April 10th, we will be releasing Tender's the Night and The Idol. So that puts finis to our Jennifer Jones series. Then after that, Hollywood Studios Year by Year, MGM 1932, Red-Headed Woman, and Red Dust.
Oh, that's going to be great.
Right after that, April 24th, is our series on Call Me Jimmy, the films of James Stewart. So we saw about half of the films on that program until they were canceled. So yeah, as Elise was saying, we are going to watch the rest of them, and then we're going to focus in on a couple of them, but we'll probably talk about the ensemble and some of the new things that Elise in particular learned, because you haven't seen a lot of these Westerns, and I guess we'll see what you feel about them. And there were some I hadn't seen either, so...
Yeah, neither of us were that familiar with the Man Westerns.
No. After that, it starts out with Setsuko Hara, and during the summer we had blocked out a couple of special episodes for TIFF retrospectives. Probably those aren't going to happen, so we're going to have a couple more hand-chosen special episodes that each of us will choose one of. So that's something we'll be adding to the calendar.
Or not. By June, things might be opening again. We're, like everybody else, we're playing it by ear right now.
That's right. So hopefully you're okay out there, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah.